destructive reign of the Nazis to the fear inspired by the Berlin Wall, it's a city full of dark secrets. And yet, much of Berlin's underworld has never been explored, until now. We'll peel back the streets of Berlin to reveal some of the greatest examples of wartime engineering. We'll go beneath the modern skyscrapers, below the metro lines, and into the off-limit and abandoned nerve centers of one of the most secretive and brutal regimes of the Western world, the Nazis. Mr. Sasha, guten Tag.
Hello, Eric.
Thank you for helping me out here. Sasha Kyle is a member of the Berlin Underworlds Association. The group was founded in 1997, just 8 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And Sasha and his group were my key to getting underground. Sasha, why is it important for you that Berlin and the world sees this secret?
Because it's a time capsule for the Berlin history, and we always can learn from our history. If you don't know it, you are damned to repeat it.
Sasha and his group have been the first to set foot in many forgotten Nazi and communist sites, sealed off beneath the streets. In the past 10 years, they found a German truck buried in the rubble 30 feet beneath the ground. Loaded weapons, helmets, half-written notepads, even installations of the Warsaw Pact, frozen in time in the underground lair of the Nazis. A hidden world that for 70 years has managed to support the tons of increasing pressure bearing down on it from the growing city up above. I would meet up with Sasha and the Berlin Underworlds Association later. But first, I wanted to do some exploring on my own. My first stop was a neighborhood in East Berlin. Today, the street was lined with apartments, but more than 60 years ago, it was the nerve center of the Nazi Party. Hitler's chancellery, Goebbels' propaganda ministry, and the foreign ministry of the Reich all stood here before they were destroyed by Allied bombs in the war. Entire bunker cities with roads and cars once connected these buildings. Today, like the buildings themselves, most of the bunkers are destroyed. But there was one Nazi building still standing. It was the Traffic Ministry of the Third Reich. The Traffic Ministry was best known for building Germany's famous Autobahn. Today, the building was abandoned and full of bullet holes, but I found a way into its back courtyard to see if I could find the existence of a lost bunker. All around us is what would have been the former East Berlin. This was it. This was World War II. All those holes and stripe from bullets. Hundreds of workers once filled the Traffic Ministry. It would have been one of the Allied forces' biggest targets. That means there was no doubt that there would have been a bunker on the premises in case of attack. This looks like the entry to a bunker. This is not open to the public. I mean, if you look at the conditions, any step I'm going to take, I might cave in. All right, I'm going to go down here. I'm going to slowly descend. And I'm walking kind of gingerly because, again, I can't tell these boards how old they are. And I can see chambers from right here. This is a corridor that leads to another series of bunkers. I was more than 15 feet beneath the courtyard of the Traffic Ministry and just over 150 yards from where the now destroyed Führer bunker once sat, the very site where Hitler and his wife Eva Braun took their lives. While they are located near each other, there is no evidence that the Traffic Ministry bunker and Hitler's would have been connected. But there was evidence of tunnels connecting this bunker to the subway and airport. Crumbling walls prevented me from finding these subterranean escape routes. And this is the jewel that I would like to go into, but I don't know if I can. Appears to be some labyrinth of rooms, but this is stopping me from going in there. And that's stopping me from going in there. So I guess I'm going in there. If you never see me again, I'll tell my mom I love her. It looks like there might have been a toilet right here. There's ovens right here. Look, there would have been kitchens, right? In some of these places, there would have been kitchens. There were remnants of kitchens, ventilation, plumbing, untouched since the fall of the Nazis. This looks like in here really looks like what you'd imagine a bunker to be. I'm sorry we can't get in here. Unfortunately, one of the walls inside had collapsed. But soon Sasha and the Berlin Underworlds Association would be back to investigate and piece together the clues of the past. I had just gotten my first taste of the mystery that is Berlin's underworld. There was a whole wall in there that had caved in, and I'm probably going to leave this bunker be. But I'm told there are vast labyrinths of bunkers in this entire city. Now I'm going to find them. Thousands of bunkers are hidden beneath the streets of Berlin, but it was no easy task to put them there. The name Berlin is Slavic for swamp, and it sits in the lowland plain of the Berlin-Warsaw Glacial Valley, created during the Ice Age. But building a city on top of this swamp means you can't dig down more than 10 feet without hitting water. So how was Hitler able to build over 1,000 bunkers beneath the streets? He can thank another infamous dictator, Napoleon III, for paving the way. After the Prussians defeated Napoleon III in the Franco-Prussian War in 1871, France was forced to pay reparations to the new German Empire. Most of this money went straight underground. Berlin could finally afford to utilize the expensive but effective modern pumping technology and waterproofing techniques to create their underground infrastructure. The metro was built in the early 1900s, and the first 7 of the eventual 88 miles of watertight tunnels were carved out under Berlin's sandy soil. 33 years later, in preparation for the impending war, German engineers led by Hitler's architect Albert Speer began their difficult and secretive journey into the underground. Since then, Berlin's underworld has been synonymous with secrecy. While Nazi monuments and buildings were transforming the skyline, beneath the ground, subterranean construction was going on in a ratio of 1 to 3. That means for every 1 foot of construction Berliners saw above the ground, there was at least 3 feet of construction going on below. And this hidden world of Hitler's is still there. It's dangerous, it's dark, and buried up to 150 feet beneath the ground. It's not easy to get to, unless you know where to look. Up next, Berlin is more than just bunkers.
All right, going into a tunnel from the past.
Hitler's own nephew, William Patrick, served against him in World War II as a medical corpsman in the U.S. Navy.
When Hitler came to power, he had plans to transform Berlin into a city that would rival ancient Rome. He called his vision Germania. And like the Romans, he commissioned structures that would both awe and intimidate. Most of his plans were shelved when the war came in 1939. But somewhere beneath this park, a piece of Germania still remains.
Architecture had always been a passion of Hitler's, and he began sketching plans of Germania's future monuments when he was in his early 30s, a time when Nazi Germany seemed like a far-fetched fantasy. But on January 30th, 1933, Hitler was named Chancellor of Germany, and his fantasy was about to become reality. One of his first orders of business was to transform Berlin into a city worthy to be the capital of his 1,000-year Reich. He would call his new city Germania, and would model his buildings after those of ancient Rome. Today, remnants of Hitler's Germania still remain.
Dietmar.
Hi, Eric.
Wie geht es Ihnen? How are you?
Oh, fine. It's geht gut.
Sasha sent me to meet his colleague, Dietmar Arnold, the chairman of the Berlin Underworlds Association.
Here on this place, there was a Führer monument.
Dietmar is an urban historian and underground expert. He and his group have mapped out Hitler's hidden underground, an underground most have no idea still exists.
So again, explain to me, what is Germania?
Germania was a Nazi urban planning to change Berlin to the main capital on the world. Nazis like to occupy the whole world, and so they need a really big capital for this, you know.
But Hitler didn't just need a big capital. He needed one that would convey the message of the Reich. For him, architecture was much more than just buildings. It was, as he said, the word in stone. The architect he hired to help convey this message was Albert Speer. Speer and Hitler set out to redesign the capital, and Dietmar had the plans to prove it. He showed me blueprints of Hitler's dream capital city, most of which was never built. But a series of underground tunnels were constructed, and they still existed beneath our feet. The tunnels were called the Axis tunnels, and they were meant to carry millions of citizens in and out of Hitler's Nazi-dominated world. Today, they're hidden below Tiergarten Park.
You like a helmet?
Yeah, please.
You need this.
Okay.
Okay.
Now let's go.
We can go on.
Okay.
Put on this.
All right.
Now you can come.
All right, going into a tunnel from the past.
I climbed down over 50 feet and over 60 years back in time into what they call the blind tunnels.
Oh, wow, this is it, huh?
This is one of the last parts of Germania.
I'm not sure how well I can see this, but I can see the water. The ground is flooded out. It looks, what, about a ceiling maybe 20, 25 feet high. I see rebar along there, and you hear a tremendous echo.
Hello! It's like in the mountains.
Germania's underground highway tunnels were meant to be finished in 1950 and were supposed to be almost 8,000 feet long, but only 10% were completed, and I was walking down the middle of what would have been Hitler's four-lane highway. The highway sat 30 feet beneath the traffic-free parade route leading into Hitler's dream world. 750 feet of tunnel remained, 3 levels deep. 2 levels would have carried cars in and out of Germania's capital, and the deepest level was for the metro. Today, the tunnels were full of water seeping in from the wet ground just beyond the concrete. But if Hitler had his way, I'd be standing in the middle of one of the most important highways in the world, one that led people in and out of the nerve center of Nazi Germany.
We're looking at what would have been Hitler's highway. This would have been the highway to his dream world, his Germania that would have lasted 1,000 years. And this is the last link to that.
But what makes these tunnels even more impressive is their construction. These concrete walls would have had to support the massive weight of the buildings Hitler was planning to build up above. Hitler commissioned buildings meant to dwarf the world's most famous structures, like one of his inspirations, Napoleon's Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Hitler commissioned Speer to build his own, only his had to be 4 times higher and 6 times wider than the one in Paris. It would weigh over 400 tons. That's a lot of weight sitting on top of Berlin's unstable sandy soil and on top of Hitler's subterranean highway. But the arch was just the beginning. Hitler's plans for Germania began in 1935 and were based on 2 huge intersecting boulevards. The existing Unter den Lindenstrasse, or Under the Linden Street, was to be extended, and the road was to be widened to 200 feet. It would be renamed the East-West Axis, and crossing it would be an even bigger one, the North-South Axis. The North-South Axis was inspired by the famous Parisian boulevard, the Champs-Élysées. Only Germania Street would be 70 feet wider at a total width of 400 feet. The 400-foot-tall triumphal arch would sit at its head. This north-south axis was meant to be the official parade route of Germania, and the tunnels Dietmar and I were exploring below allowed it to stay traffic-free. Dwarfed by the oversized administration buildings of the Reich, jubilant masses would have been ushered along this route, leading to the Volkshalle, or People's Hall. Its precise location at the end of the parade route would have actually required diverting the River Spree. The Volkshalle was designed to be 950 feet high and was to be topped with the largest dome in the world. That's 6 times larger than its inspiration, the Pantheon in Rome. 150 to 180,000 people could have fit inside. Made entirely of granite, the Great Hall would have been the focal point of Germania and would have weighed in at over 550 tons. But the Great Hall was never built. In fact, modern engineers say the body heat of 170,000 people in the dome-shaped building would have caused so much precipitation, rain would actually fall from the ceiling. The north-south axis or parade route was never completed either, and neither was Hitler's triumphal arch. Speer estimated he could transform the entire face of Berlin by 1950. Planning began in 1935, but by 1941, Berlin was a full-blown battlefield, and his attention was turned to building bunkers. The tunnels beneath the park are one of the few things left of Hitler's ill-fated dream world. Today, over 50 feet separated them with the city Hitler planned up above, but the soil alone puts forth over 6,000 pounds per square foot of pressure. Could these tunnels possibly hold the weight of Germania? Even Speer wasn't sure. He knew Hitler's grand plans would test the bounds of engineering. So architect Speer came up with his own test. He built the GBK, or load-bearing building, on a site with similar soil conditions as the proposed arch. He then poured 12,650 tons of concrete to create a structure that mimicked the ground pressure of one of the 2 footings of the arch. The ground pressure of the GBK equaled 1.2 meganewtons per square meter, or over 10 tons per square foot. If the ground sank more than 2.5 inches, Berlin soil would not support the arch and most of Germania's immense buildings. It sank 7 inches in 3 years, proving many of Hitler's buildings would have been impossible to build. But Hitler didn't accept the results. Speer was still looking into ways to fortify Germania's soil when bombs began to fall in Berlin in the summer of 1940.
Should the world still care about this place?
I think this is necessary to save this because it's one of the last traces of this Germania planning. And if you fill this or you damage this, you have nothing realistic you can remember this crazy planning of Hitler, you know. If you not can remember to your history, the danger is really high that you can repeat this.
To never forget.
Yes.
Up next, nothing could take this building down.
Eric, please come in.
Hitler was a dedicated non-smoker and reportedly promised a gold watch to any of his close associates who quit.
Berlin is often called the most rebuilt city in the world. After World War II, roughly 60% of its buildings were destroyed. Even today, old buildings are being torn down to make way for new ones. But there is one part of Berlin's past that still remains. It's Underworld.
After seeing Hitler's and Speer's grand plans for Germania, it was obvious they'd never dream of building something just to have it buried beneath the ground. Ironically, today that's all that's left of their legacy. When war became imminent, Speer had no choice but to direct his attentions underground. His task, to make Berlin bomb-proof. It's estimated there are over 1,000 bunkers buried beneath Berlin. Some were destroyed like the Führer bunker. Others have been left abandoned like the one I'd seen at the traffic ministry. Some are hidden under homes or offices. And there's even one beneath this major metro stop.
Dietmar, guten Tag.
Hi,
Nice to see you.
nice to see you.
I met up again with underground expert Dietmar Arnold in East Berlin's Alexanderplatz, or Alexander Place. He wasted no time showing me one of the Berlin Underworlds Association's greatest finds. Located just off the Alexanderplatz metro, commuters walk by this inconspicuous door each day. Dietmar has asked us to disguise its location, so ordinary citizens don't attempt to explore this dangerous piece of Berlin's underworld on their own. We had just entered one of Berlin's largest underground civilian air raid shelters, and people waiting for the metro up above had no idea we were down here.
You listen now, this noise? This is a sound from the metro.
Yeah, you can hear this now, right? You can hear the metro.
During wartime, the rumbling above didn't mean the train had arrived at the station, but that hundreds of bombers had descended on the city. 2 million tons of bombs and explosive devices were dropped on Berlin by the Allies during the war. That's nearly 800 tons a day by 1945. In the end, the estimated death toll from Allied bombings was anywhere from 600,000 to 1 million people. By 1945, there were only enough bunkers in Berlin for 10% of the population. But for those who made it into this government-built bunker, there are no confirmed records of any bomb-related deaths. That's partly because of Berlin's sandy soil. When a bomb fell, the soft soil would help to absorb the shock of the blast. The bunker below would sway like a ship, and the walls protecting the people would stay intact.
So explain to me about the construction of this bunker.
Yes. Now we are here around 12-13 meters under Alexander Place, and we have here 3 underground levels. But over we have a ceiling from 3 meters, steel concrete. The walls around 2 meters. This was one of the safety bunker here around Alexander Place.
Walls 6 feet thick, concrete ceilings 10 feet, and above that 10 feet of sandy soil to absorb the shock of bombs. That's outrageous compared to normal building standards. In fact, the ceiling's live load, or the total amount of pressure the ceiling can handle, is 2,500 times the load of a normal building. Normal buildings today are constructed to withstand a live load of only 75 to 100 pounds per square foot. That means the ceiling of Alexanderplatz can support more than 200,000 pounds, or nearly 3 18-wheeler trucks per square foot. This protected bunker was built to hold 3,500 people, but during the worst bombing, 9,000 people were crammed down here.
There was a lot of people in the entrances, but this was full. You know, and they could not go in, and then they have 5 minutes to look for another place, you know. And there were some situations, for example, when they opened the bunker after a bomb attack, 50 people right in the entrance was dead because they could not go in.
One thing you can't help but notice is that it's cold down here. When citizens, civilians, soldiers came down here, were they freezing during the winter?
You need not a heating system because if are here 9,000 people inside, it's warm up here so fast, you cannot believe this. It's like, say, if you go inside of a sauna.
The average person has the body heat equivalent to that of a 100-watt light bulb.
So if this is a 100-watt lamp,
Yes.
and there's 9,000 of these in here,
Yes.
suddenly it's a sauna.
Yeah, it's like a heating system.
Since they first gained access in the late 1990s, Dietmar and Berlin's Underworlds Association continue to explore Alexanderplatz, hoping to find more clues to unlock the secrets of Berlin's dark past. And on a visit last year, they found one. They were drilling a hole to measure the thickness of this wall, About 4 feet in, the drill popped out into a hollow space. They put a tiny camera through the hole and saw a large tunnel.
And the tunnel go in this direction, and the tunnel go in this direction, and nobody know what's behind really.
So you're saying there's another bunker behind this one?
It's possible,
So it may be like a time capsule in there that's never been opened.
maybe.
My next stop was a residential neighborhood in East Berlin. I met up with Dietmar's Underworld partner, Sascha Kyle.
Eric, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
Thank you for showing me around some more.
Yes, welcome to the Fichtestraße.
We were in the neighborhood of Kreuzberg, which was almost completely destroyed during World War II. But one oddly shaped building remained from that time. The building was called the Gasometer and stood 69 feet high and 184 feet wide. It was originally built in 1846 as a substation of Kreuzberg gas. But the introduction of electric street lamps in the late 1800s made this substation obsolete. In 1940, the Germans converted it into a bunker, but this was no ordinary bunker. Few others before had perfected above-the-ground bunkers like the Nazis, but they had to, since they were running out of the time, money, and supplies needed to continue building underground. They started looking for existing buildings to fortify. The Gasometer, or Fichte bunker, was an ideal candidate. 5 stories were above the ground and 1 was below. But all 6 floors were fortified and incredibly safe.
Let's go. This is the only remaining entrance to the bunker. Eric, please come in.
Getting a smell of it. It smells like motor oil, like a garage,
Yes.
where you fix
From
cars.
the diesel. It's from the diesel.
I'm smelling diesel.
The strong smell of diesel was coming from the basement, where Sascha tells me there's a diesel-powered generator left over from the 1940s. It's a generator large enough to power this fortified city that had a population of 6,500. I was barely inside, but I could tell this place was massive and disoriented. I couldn't tell if I was above ground or below. Once a cavernous hole for holding gas, the Nazis added 6 separate floors connected by 5 stairwells and 3 lifts. Each floor had 120 rooms. The entire bunker had 25 kitchens, a hospital on each floor, and even a prison on the bottom level. Truly a city of its own.
So this is a row of toilets, and here you go. I'm imagining they were in a better state 60 years ago. Besetzt?
Yes.
Was ist besetzt?
It's locked.
So
Someone
this
is
is locked,
inside.
right? You can see there's someone's inside.
Hello.
The war's over, you can come out now.
The Fichte bunker even had its own post office, used to communicate with other bunker cities in Berlin.
Reichspost. It's a post system in Germany.
Telegraphs, telegrams, phone.
Yes.
This is where it would come in right here.
Communication from bunker to bunker wasn't uncommon. These fortified cities made every attempt to maintain some semblance of order, in spite of the chaos outside.
It was an orientation system in this. You see the chamber numbers? The biggest.
Sure, okay, so that's Raum, or room 172 to 138 are over there. This is room 198 to 231. This tells you where the hospital is back here. It's like a dormitory. It's a sort of macabre dormitory.
Fichte bunker had many signs and orientation devices,
Eingang is entrance.
Entrance.
but an extremely confusing layout.
Another inner ring of rooms right here, just like the outer ring. I mean, it's just a labyrinth, a circle of rooms that keep going around.
Sascha told me it was done on purpose, not to confuse people, but bombs. The safest place to be in the bunker was the center. Fichte bunker was built with 3 circular rings, and inside each ring were rooms whose angled walls helped to provide protection from blasts. It's simple physics. By the time the energy of the blast gets to the center of the bunker, it has been less than 30% by each 90-degree angle it hits.
How did they change the interior of this building from a gas storage facility to a bunker with 1,200 rooms, with kitchens, with bathrooms? How did they do that?
They filled in the concrete. It was not so difficult because an existing wall of bricks was here and metal rings in it, and so they only had to fill the room between.
So this was already a somewhat fortified building because of its nature?
Yes.
How much more concrete did they add to the brick structure that was already here?
About 2 meters.
6 more feet of concrete was added to the already 5 feet of existing brick. That made the walls nearly 12 feet thick. On top of that, the walls of the 720 inner rooms were all made of reinforced concrete, the key ingredient to Nazi bunker building techniques. This bunker saved upwards of 30,000 people from Allied bomb attacks. After the war, it became a shelter for Germans who had lost their homes. Later, it was filled with enough food to feed the entire city for 2 full days during the East German blockades of the West.
This looks like carrots.
We had 7,000 tons of food stored here in this building.
Ah, salted carrots. Delicious when your city gets blockaded.
Today, this gasometer, turned bunker, turned shelter, turned food storage, may be turned into condominiums. Just another example of the changing face of Berlin. Up next,
So this is the handiwork of the French, right?
even 50 tons of TNT couldn't destroy this buried piece of Berlin's past.
Hitler's favorite movies were King Kong and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Next stop, Humboldt-Hain Park in East Berlin. Its hilly landscape is a favorite for joggers and tourists who climb to the top to check out the panoramic views. But in Berlin, things aren't always as they seem. This hill wasn't always a hill, and the Nazi fortress peeking out from beneath the soil wasn't always underground. The fortress is called the Flak Tower, and it was one of 3 built in Berlin by the Nazis. It was, and still is, considered a feat of German engineering. At over 140 feet high and separated into 7 levels, the Flak Tower of Humboldt was the perfect vantage point for the Nazis to observe movement of Soviet troops and to fire at Allied planes from anti-aircraft platforms. Built from reinforced concrete, the Flak Tower has 12-foot thick foundations, 8.5-foot thick outside walls, and 5-foot thick interior walls. The roof was 12.5 feet thick. German architects had succeeded in building a bomb-proof building. At the end of the war, Soviet troops had surrounded the Flak Tower and were firing directly at it for 3 days straight, but nothing could bring it down. 3 years after the war ended, the Flak Tower and everything reminiscent of Hitler's military might was ordered to be destroyed. But this was no easy task. Allied French troops tried 3 times with over 50 tons of TNT and only succeeded in crumbling the southeast side. The north side still remains intact, albeit buried beneath the rubble of old Berlin.
So I've noticed there aren't many hills or mountains in Berlin.
There were not many. After the war, we had some more.
There were more after the war, right? Okay, you have to
Yes,
explain
yes,
that. That's a
yes.
loaded answer there.
They are artificial, like this one.
This is an artificial mountain.
Oh, yes.
From the rubble of the war.
Yes.
Berlin's landscape is relatively flat, but look at a topographical map and it appears otherwise. That's because the hills you see aren't natural formations. They're made up of debris. The rubble hills were erected in the late 1940s and early 1950s during a massive cleanup by the Allies of war-torn Berlin. Sasha told me that after the war, 80% of the streets in central Berlin were destroyed. That meant the pavement, sidewalks, trees, houses, cars, bus stops, and anything else in the path of Allied bombs would have been in ruins and buried beneath my feet. But I wanted to see for myself. I was about to dig into a hill made of 60 million cubic feet of rubble, a hill built directly on top of the Flak Tower.
So if we dig right here, I'm going to find the ruins of Berlin. All right, let's do it. Definitely hit something kind of hard here, right? That didn't take too long, did it? Here's concrete. Here's more. This we don't even have to dig. It's right here at the surface. Look, here you go. This is all from Berlin.
There were layers and layers of history lying just inches beneath our feet.
It's a big mountain. Here, there's more.
Newly constructed 1940s homes were mixed up with Prussian palaces and carted by the truckload to this very spot. Since they couldn't destroy it, the plan of the Allies was to bury any sign of the Nazis' impressive Flak Tower beneath the rubble of war-torn Berlin. The east, west, and south side went off without a hitch. Grass and trees were planted, and the new hill took root. But the north side of the Flak Tower slopes down towards the U-Bahn rail. Piling rubble that would vibrate when the train passed would be far too dangerous, so the north face was left open. And lucky for us, that's how we were going to get in. Sasha and I met up with Reinhard Janik,
This is our expert for today,
a Flak Tower author and expert.
Eric.
Rainer, guten Tag. Thank you very much for meeting with us.
Sasha offered to translate as Reinhard led me through the 7-layered fortress. This concrete structure took only 6 months to build and was braced with steel rods, a technique perfected by the Germans that rendered their bunkers and towers bomb-proof.
My gosh, you know what? If I didn't see how reinforced these stairwells were, this whole building, it would look as if This is made of cardboard, and it's all going to come down.
This is the original stairwell.
This is the original stairwell.
104.
What does this say here?
This Turm
Okay, Tower 2.
Yeah, 4th level.
We were on the 4th level of a 7-story building, and yet we were still buried over 60 feet beneath the ground. The top 4 levels were strictly for military use, with observation posts and an anti-aircraft gun platform. Below was a bunker for 35,000 civilians and 2,000 soldiers and their families. The flak tower was so secure, Hitler ordered precious artifacts and artworks once housed in Berlin's museums to be stored here. The flak tower even had its own movie theater.
Like a small town.
It's a small town. This is a fortified village.
The debris from the Allied French attempts to destroy the flak tower was still littered all over the floors.
So this is the handiwork of the French, right? Now we're descending to another level.
Be careful. This is a weapon. It first looks like a pipe, a normal pipe, but this is left from a weapon, an anti-tank weapon, with an explosive head in front, and then it was fired, and what was left was the pipe.
Ah, I see.
It's only for one use.
Yeah, right. This was only one use. Quite an eerie remnant from this time. This is where you get a sense of the width. How wide from wall to wall?
It's 70 meters.
70 meters wide.
72 meters.
72 meters, okay, Duncan.
72 meters, or 236 feet, would normally be an easy target. But I was about to see why the flak tower never came down. The French blasts on the southeast side revealed a spiderweb of steel rebar inside the thick concrete.
Look at this, the reinforced steel, and to me it looks redundant. How much rebar is in this building?
We have in 1 cubic meter of concrete about 50 kilos of steel.
That's 110,000 pounds of steel rebar for every 100 cubic feet of cement. Normal concrete construction today uses approximately 3,300 pounds of steel.
So contemporary buildings will have maybe 1/3 to 1/4 of that in a typical building, right?
You're right. Yeah.
Today, the flak tower sits abandoned, 140 feet beneath the rubble of Humboldt-Hain Park. And while Sasha and his group continue to try to piece together its past, exactly what went on inside its walls remains a mystery.
This was a secret building. It was a military building, and so it was a kind of secret. And we have no original pictures from the inside.
Right, so we have to speculate.
Yes.
Speculation is common in a city like Berlin. A city whose secrets are only now coming to the surface. Up next, the beginnings of Berlin's underworld.
I mean, this is an immense structure. Oh my God, this one is even bigger.
The very first bomb dropped by the Allies on Berlin during World War II killed an elephant in the Berlin Zoo.
Long before the Berlin Wall divided the city and Hitler's delusions nearly destroyed it, Berlin was a cosmopolitan capital. It was known for its liberal subcultures, its good music, and of course, its beer.
Today, the beer garden is synonymous with life in Berlin. There's no shortage of them scattered throughout the city. But here, beer is much more than just a cold drink. This concoction of water, malted barley, hops, and yeast is a deep-seated tradition in Germany's history. A tradition that relied on the depths of Berlin's underground.
Hello, Ingmar.
How are you?
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Very nice.
Good. I was expecting you to greet me with beer.
Oh, maybe we have another beer afterwards.
Excellent.
Ingmar Arnold, an underground specialist and beer connoisseur, was showing me the remains of the Betzel family brewery, located in today's East Berlin. From 1846 to 1948, the Betzel family was the largest private brewery in Berlin. At their height, they produced 120,000 liters of beer and had a subterranean storage capacity of over 40,000 liters at a time. That's over 110,000 bottles of beer brewing underground.
Germans are renowned for their beer making. What do they do better than the rest of the world?
This is a purity law. Just the main basic elements of beer, hop and grain and water, nothing else. You make the best beer in the world. This is a secret.
The brewers of Berlin wanted to separate their beer brewing techniques from the ones of their Bavarian neighbors to the south. Instead of the age-old ale, they would brew lager. And they needed the cold, damp spaces of the underground to do it. Berlin brewers needed to keep their new revolutionary lager at approximately 32 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 30 days before it was ready to drink. But in 1844, there was no electricity for refrigeration, so necessity became the mother of invention.
They needed to cool the beer, they needed underground, and they found it here. And they could go into the underground and they could cool the beer here. Therefore, the brewers invented the Berlin Underground.
Before there were bunkers, there was beer, and that's not an easy feat in a city whose name means swamp. So how'd they do it? How, long before Hitler built his bunkers, were beer makers able to master the complex digging and pumping techniques necessary to go underground? They didn't. Instead, they found one of the few hills in Berlin, moved their factory on top of it, and dug their cellars more than 80 feet into its dry, rocky soil. There were 15 to 20 rooms, each 20 feet tall and 20 feet wide, tracks for small carts to carry the barrels, and even rooms for the beermeister to test his brew. Before Hitler or the Metro ever broke ground, they had succeeded in creating Berlin's first underground city.
Welcome to the Underworld of Berlin.
This is quite a large vault right here, a storage area right here.
They're very, very impressive. More than 20,000 square meters are just lying 20 meters beneath the streets of Berlin.
That's approximately 65 feet beneath the bustling former factory above, and tons of pressure on the cellars below. But these cellars were built to last. Arched ceilings help support the pressure, and the rocky soil it's dug into gives it a sturdy base.
Oh my God! This one is even bigger, right? This is an immense structure. We've got a ceiling that's probably 25 feet high. I'm guessing in the width about 20 feet. And I walk past these and I can see there's other rooms, other chambers, other storage facilities. Look at the size of these. These all would have been filled with beer, right? To the walls, to the ceiling, filled with beer.
Once the lager had cooled for a month, wooden barrels were loaded onto the horses waiting up above to deliver fresh and cold lager to the beer gardens of Berlin. But there was much more than beer drinking going on in the gardens.
Well, beer has, of course, an important function, a cultural function for the self-identifying understanding of Germans, and it played a very important part in politics.
Political parties like the Communists, Social Democrats, and Nazis used the lure of free beer to win votes. And what better platform than at a beer garden, where 200 to 300 citizens gathered each day to have a drink. Hitler even gave his first speech in Munich in a beer garden in 1923. And his architect, Albert Speer, was first introduced to Hitler after a beer garden performance in 1930. Beer halls had given Hitler his rise to fame. Now they'd provide him with the protection he needed to wage war on the world. These same rooms that once stored Betzel's famous beer were turned into a war-making factory in 1939.
They made radar equipment and for the mass communications among the army, because this production was so important. They just took this production site into the underground that it wouldn't be destroyed by the planes.
And how come Betzel was wiped out after the war?
Because after the war, this part became a part of East Berlin, and the Communist Party didn't allow private enterprises like the Betzel Brewery.
It also didn't help that Betzel won the gold medal for beer production during the Nazi regime. This stigma tarnished the legacy of Betzel beer, just as it tarnished the once bright future of Berlin. A madman, a soil full of secrets. In less than 100 years, Berlin went from a swampy Prussian province to the battleground of the 20th century. And its underground all innocently started with beer. Today, a group of modern-day Berliners are adding their own layer to the underground by daring to dig up the secrets of the past. As eyewitnesses die and new construction covers up clues, their job gets harder and harder.
We see the streets and the whole city with other eyes. Others are looking for the clouds and we look for the ground.
But the search has only just begun.
We have worked for generations. There are so many secrets. Our work will be never done.
In less than 10 years,